Hey guys, welcome to Make the Future. I'm Michael Curry. I'm coming to you from Bangkok, Thailand. Joining us from America, we have
Hossein Kuhani.
And then also joining us from Germany, we have
Daniel Valenzuela. Hello.
With my friend yesterday, we were talking about how you could visualize technological progress as the disruption of asshole technologies. Cell phones used to be for assholes, and now it's for everybody. Helicopters, I'm thinking, used to be for like rich assholes like Donald Trump. And soon with, self-driving helicopters going to be available for everyone. One way to think of progress is that technologies that were once reserved for the very few become available to everyone. And that's true technology, right? In the past, the king could have an amazing life, but it's only really like an improvement when everyone can have access to that same ability, right?
It gets cheaper by selling a lot of products and improving the products, and like all this economic typical stuff. I guess in one way you could also say that the assholes are paying for the development of the broad available technology. They're being assholes, but in an economic system, which leads to that.
So the message of this podcast is thank you to all the assholes.
Thanks for nothing, or for something.
By assholes, you mean like the rich people? Is this?
I guess, yeah. If you watch a movie in the 1990s, the cliche was like the asshole stockbroker is the one with the carphone or the cell phone, yelling buy, sell into his cell phone. People just hate the guy with the cell phone, right? There's never a positive character with a cell phone. And then I feel like today, a few years ago, Donald Trump at the beginning of every episode of The Apprentice would take a helicopter into the Trump Tower. And all of that is designed to make him seem really important and great and everything. But imagine if in the future, thousands of people every day in Manhattan are entering work by flying in, on little self-driving helicopters. So suddenly that status symbol of Trump is just something that everybody does and it's very normal. Those are my two examples, but I'm wondering if there are more that I'm missing that might be interesting to think about.
Well, I guess the only comment I have is maybe not exactly relevant to the point you're making, but when it comes to the rich people and poor people and status, I think it's interesting to remember that for thousands of years, people perceived the economy as a static pie, that whoever has a larger slice of the pie of the economy, it's taking their part. So the rich people, they were considered as, for a while, people hated them because they were having more and making them having less. But then by the introduction of capitalism, banking and financial revolution, nowadays we all perceive people like Elon Musk as idols and icons because they are making the pie larger. And so now we perceive rich people, even stockbrokers, I guess it's different than just because they of their personal money that they have. There are so many different types of rich people that we should make separation. So there are some of them. A good example is that let's say there is an epidemic of a disease and there's Ebola, and then suddenly the stocks of the two pharmaceutical companies rockets. So this is thanks to the works of stock, and we need that because we need to do that to make new medicine instead of panicking and so on. So the new economy that is heavily based on the stock market and the growth of our economies, which is a key factor in modern lives, is it's heavily dependent. So I guess we will start looking at people in stocks at more prestigious people. I guess the more we move on to the future. I guess I don't know if that's the point you were trying to make, but it just triggered these ideas in my mind.
Can I say something? Go ahead, Daniel. Go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly say that's I feel like what you were doing was just like reframing what we were saying, like in a more simple language, with the assholes are paying for making the technology available for everybody. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was wondering if that's exactly the asshole we're talking about.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's interesting because I think there are two kinds of rich people that, Haas, you're talking about. There's the rich entrepreneurs who are rich simply because they innovated and they captured a piece of that pie. They don't necessarily even need to be rich, like, I don't know, John Carmack or I don't know, there's some other guys, like, who was the guy that did that famous presentation at Xerox PARC, who created the graphical user interface. So those guys didn't get rich off of their innovations. Or there's some AI professors, some famous AI professors that remain academics, but nevertheless have really pushed forward the envelope. Or some famous, like, early Google employees that are, like, architected Gmail or PageRank. Well, maybe not PageRank, because that was Sergey and Larry. But all I'm trying to say is that innovation doesn't necessarily to wealth. But then, so that's category number one, are the innovators, often who are very rich. And then category number two, which is what I was talking about, who are people that are just rich. They could be rich through inheritance. They could be rich through stealing. It doesn't matter how they became rich. They're just rich, and then they're spending money on these goods. So they could buy cell phones. They can buy helicopters. They can buy the vaccines that I guess you're talking about there, Haas. So it seems to me like there's two categories of rich people here. And I guess my point is we I guess depend on both of them, because we depend on the innovators, obviously, but also on the early adopters to make the products financially viable in their early stages.
That's very true. It reminds me of Tesla, that the three stages of Tesla, that the first stage was the supercars for the rich in order for the company to rise up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely like a strategy of Tesla, where you see this also, where they like try to roll it out now for like some bigger masses and eventually maybe to even more masses. And that's also something, I don't know, I often consider as like my career plans, to like first go where the money is, to get a good education, basically, like to learn faster, learn from good people who are there because there's money, and eventually to use it for like, yeah, people I don't know, like maybe like for more social intent.
There's other kinds of goods that people can spend money on to gain status that I feel like are basically deadweight losses to society. I feel like there's a huge segment of the population, their entire social status and their lives are basically, they consist of conspicuous consumption of goods that have no relevance to the overall arc of innovation into the future. So there's people, I don't know, like a lot of nouveau riche in China, and they spend a lot of their money on purses or fancy cars or clothing. And I feel like it would be useful if we could think of ways to sort of pull that huge segment of the population away from basically just being deadweight losses to the overall human mission and into some kind of relevance. Because otherwise, like, really, all those people could be machine gunned away, and there would be no difference to the future of society, right? So, and what can we do about that?
I think that's pretty extreme. I don't know, like,
I'm not proposing that, of course.
No. That's definitely very interesting, but that's also like very subjective, because it depends on your view of, like, I don't know, like which people are useful and which people are not useful, and like how you see the future. I don't know. That's a good question. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't know. It just made me think.
Do you already have some thoughts on this, Michael?
I, I actually I don't know. I don't know how to bring these people into the space of productivity. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe at the end of the day, uh, you know, when Isaac Newton was alive, there, he existed in a society, many of whom were probably invested very heavily in like climbing some social ladder of the 17th century, wearing the fanciest wigs or something, and having the most powdered cheeks, and those thousands of noblemen that were focused on that and had a bunch of landed inheritance and fancy castles. They didn't stop Isaac Newton from inventing calculus and pushing us into the modern age. So maybe it's not so bad, as long as these people are not actively harming anything. Perhaps their presence is not a detriment. And of course, for every 100 people that are not interested, maybe they'll have children, and some of those children will turn out to be an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs or an innovator.
But also, I guess I have just the wealthy consumers. I guess they're also important because they are like the push they push the standards of quality, even though it looks like extravagant and like unnecessary, but deep down every person needs to have the end of the spectrum being pushed forward. It triggers the anxiety for production and growth of the economy, I think.
All right.
And Michael, would you also like? I agree with Haas. That's basically like people which are still like building blocks of our economy in some way. But do you agree or disagree, Michael, about, for example, how many innovators are dependent on those people? Because, for example, there are plenty of like Silicon Valley startups that target consumers and that maybe target like fashion consumers or whatever. And in your way, you're saying that, for example, fashion, for example, I mean that was your example, I guess. But that this is something like decelerating the growth or like the vision to the future for people. So I don't know. What do you think? Because would you then say those like those people who like make companies targeting like consumers are not innovators, and those people, to which group belong those people then? I don't know.
I guess all you've convinced me of is that they're not a detraction. But I'm not convinced that they are a net positive. And I want to be clear, like we've just talked about early adopters. So if some rich person is spending their money on new Oculus Rifts, or if they're, purchasing electric cars or something, then by all means, I think they're contributing by being early adopters and making some of these innovative ideas less loss-making at their initial stages, which is important. But if all they're doing is spending their money buying purses, which is my example, or fashion items, which I don't believe qualities, I think that the capital that they control is essentially wasted. And I'm willing to be convinced that it's not a detraction, because
Okay.
after all, wealth is, as Haas eloquently illustrated, wealth is not a zero-sum game. So it's not like, unless you've literally stolen a bunch of money from Elon Musk and then bought purses with it, if it's your own money, then by all means, spend it on, paying a bunch of artists to paint your portrait 1,000 times, as Warren Buffett
So you're
once said he would do.
so you're
I mean,
talking about rich people buying purses. But then again, like anyway, you have like you can like what are purses? It's maybe an object, to express yourself, and it's also probably like like it has something like you can call like many things you can call it art as well. And so in that way, I think it will be very difficult to draw lines, for example, where it is maybe not useful, because, for example, I can imagine when I'm rich to like, like try out like very expensive meals from like world-class cooks, for example, just because I'm
Okay.
really interested in food, and that's like a passion of mine and like an art I like, although it's maybe not that innovative. I don't know. Also art with like music, and I don't know.
Can I give you a slightly better example, and then Haas, you can respond? So you make a
Yes.
good point. Thank you. You make a good point, Daniel, that purses have artistic merit. Maybe you like purses because they're beautiful and not because they enhance your social standing with the peers that say, "Oh, a Birkin bag. This girl must be, really rich, or must have really high status." And you're right. Maybe buying expensive things can have some intrinsic value in itself for the artistic merit. But what about this? I was in Dubai a couple of years ago, and our driver was telling us how license plates there can be purchased, and it's all in order from 1 to a million, basically, or to however many cars there are. Now, the sheikh, the leader of Dubai, has license plate number 1, and his immediate family basically have the license plates in the single digits. And you can buy the license plates, and obviously people want to have a very short license plate. That's the status, right? So the richer you are, the shorter the license plate you basically buy. So it's not enough to have like a supercar a Maserati that you purchased. You also have to then go to the license bureau or the private market and buy a ridiculously short license plate, or else people will just laugh at you like, what the hell is this guy with a 6-digit license plate and a Maserati? Like, who does he think he is? So
But then
explain. Yeah, I want you to justify that expenditure as having any merit whatsoever,
I
because it's
can
just,
justify
yeah.
it. I think I can justify it, and I can also like point the finger in the other direction. Like, I don't think it would necessarily be the fault of the person consuming this license plate or buying this license plate. It could be, for example, an innovator who needs the necessary power or influence to like do innovation. But I think it's more like the users, people in this context, are more the people who build this pressure or build this, how do you say, this the effect that
The social
like the
order.
are impressed by status, the social order. So I think there's something more wrong in that direction, or like more uselessness going on in that direction, because it definitely, you can benefit from such a license plate, like, I don't know.
Haas, do you have any thoughts about this? I won't talk anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking again that here's my introductory statement, that modern times is equal to people giving up on meanings and going after power. So I feel like it's all about power, and even social status is correlated with power, because when people show off their status, they are implying the fact that they have certain power over other people and make a distinction between themselves and the rest of the herd. But then that's where culture plays a key role. It is said in Saudi Arabia and some Middle Eastern societies that the channels of acquiring and showing off power can get so limited because of the oppression, politically and economically. Of those status variations get really limited on like so many meaningless, from a Western point of view, criteria, that it's just ridiculous. So I guess you know what I mean? So it's basically the same thing, but it's just in a different dynamics.
Yeah, now I feel like we're getting somewhere there, in the sense that you're basically saying there are channels to acquire power. And some of them, because everybody wants power, I guess. I mean, it's a fundamental human imperative. If we didn't, then I think that would be equally bad, because we'd just be lumps on a log that would have no purpose, right? I mean, the dust in space doesn't have any desire to, arrange itself in a hierarchy, but we don't want to be dust in space, right? So
can I
let's
just like throw in? I don't know if power is the correct word, but maybe I think from a like psychological perspective, I think it's more appreciation, but I'm not exactly sure.
appreciation or
Yeah,
status.
yeah, I think so. So I think that's like the like what you said, and which is like really similar, right? I guess in
Yeah,
psychology.
so if people have this primordial desire for status, and we're not trying to say that's a bad thing. We're just simply saying this is how it works. I mean, partly it's about just the hedonistic consumption of pleasure. That is part of the human experience. It doesn't matter if you have high status or not. You just want to watch a fun television show sometimes, but other times you want to make something of yourself in the world. You want to prove to yourself you can do something amazing, or you want to, have a great life. You want to impress the girl that you're interested in. Whatever, right? There's lots of reasons to want status, and I think I'm not trying to say that that's illegitimate. I'm embracing the idea of seeking status, but as Haas says, there are channels in some societies. There are very I think constructive channels to obtain that status. Like in an entrepreneurial society, someone like Elon Musk has very, very high status, and that's acquired by creating a better world for everyone else. Whereas in a society like in Dubai, you can acquire high status simply by paying for a low license plate number. That to me seems like a waste. And maybe the idea of buying a fancy purse lies somewhere in between those extremes, in that maybe it does have some artistic merit. Maybe if you buy a really nice wardrobe, you're creating a more beautiful world. So there is some intrinsic value there. But it seems to me like what we want to do is create a society where there are as many constructive channels to obtain status as possible, and we want to smash the channels that are sort of pointless. Like in Hong Kong, when the daughter of the leader of Hong Kong buys 2 gold-plated iWatches for his dog, right, that cost $1 million each. Like, is this the way that we want our children to be obtaining the status that they want? Or do we want them to, like, create businesses and give TED Talks, or, or start a 17-room startup accelerator, right? I mean, this is the right way to get status. Am I right?
Yes, I guess that's really right. That's correct. I just want to add to it that again correlate why I think status is correlated with power, because I think what's next? What's next after you have a high status? There you have power that you can use. Think of like whoever, like Elon Musk. We give him a lot of status, but what he actually like intrinsically has influence on people right now because of the status you obtain. The power is how to say, like, it just comes with it. It's a side effect. You cannot have it. You can have a very high status but then not have power. So I guess it's part of it. It's part of the social, like the mammal behavior of humans. So that's the point, I guess, for Daniel specifically, I wanted to make, because you said, I don't know if the power is the right appreciation. You said appreciation. It's really interesting that you said that word, because I was thinking again how relative and dynamic is power system in human societies, because that's again, that's where I emphasize here. Define what gives a person a status. It means that, let's say, maybe 100, maybe 500 years ago, if someone could lift a big stone with 500 kilograms, everyone would just be so respectful to that person, and that would be like a huge thing. But today, like, we have a lot of like machines, and like we just use a machine, and then if someone does that, everyone say idiot. He's just destroying his body. Like, that's how time and what gives, like, that's the power that guy had. But to that power, that intrinsic power, it's not power anymore socially. So he doesn't give him status and doesn't give him a social. So there's this intrinsic power, and there's also this social and culture power that comes with the status, I think.
Okay, so I was saying the appreciation because Michael was talking about like I don't know what the exact wording was, but like a psychologically, intrinsic need, and I feel like appreciation was the correct word there. But very often, that's why I did the earlier example. You, you seek status or power. That's absolutely something an innovator would want to do in order to innovate. But I really, really like the abstraction Michael did of our examples and everything. So I think that's so. Just to like say it again. So this is. So depending on the society or the culture, like it's a highly cultural dependent thing. You have different channels to seek status, and it also gets interesting because we all kind of like belong to different societies. For example, at work to one society, and with your friends to another society, in your sports to another society, and so you seek statuses in different worlds sometimes, and I was just thinking about if those kind of contradict each other. For example, what happens if somebody in Saudi Arabia wants, like is passionate about entrepreneurship and is building a startup there, like I don't know, like then he would need to decide how much he like, for example, likes the Silicon Valley entrepreneurship, like status structure where golden Lamborghini, which I saw in San Francisco in November, would be something, like with negative status impacts. Yeah.
Like the ridiculous consumption you might see in the Middle East, would be laughed at or worse in a more environmentally conscious area or something. Yeah, I agree with everything you guys have said, and therefore, sort of what we want to do here, if we have any role as innovators here, I feel like our role here is to innovate around commoditizing the degenerate forms of status seeking.
Yeah.
Smashing them, if you will, and leaving people no choice but to seek out the constructive forms of status seeking. Like, it seems to me like the ultimate will be if we're all in a virtual reality. At that point, what the size of house we have or the color of our Lamborghini or how many we have will be like absolutely trivial, because you can command any kind of virtual scape you want, and there will be no limit to the physical space you can occupy. So at that point, the only way to gain status is through your own creativity, your own uniqueness. And that to me seems like a far better way to organize society, a far better way to get a better society. And just on the Lamborghini thing, my friend and I were thinking about ways to smash that particular status. Like, they already have knockoff purses and knockoff watches, which helps to smash the Rolex and the purses as a status good, because people can just more easily get them. But as far as these fancy cars go, I'm surprised there isn't more of an interest in creating a business that takes the outside of a really fancy car and just puts it on the chassis of a really cheap car, like a Hyundai or something. And so you drive around in a car that looks like a Bentley or like a Lamborghini, but the guts of it are just this pathetic little car, and you can buy it for like a tenth of the price. If you could get enough people to buy those, then all of a sudden the status of having a Lamborghini is gone, and I think that would make the world a better place.
That is so cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. But the problem is, for example, with a car, that like one of the like core values such a car gives you is like, the inner values, but as a status symbol, it gets more superficially. I know that you're referring more to that last part, but I feel like that's something hard to imitate with a good, like with a convincing, like to convincingly imitate. That's what I want to say. So because you would, like, if you would see a Lamborghini, like look on a cheaper car, you would immediately notice that something's very off. You know what I mean? Motor sounds, like behavior of how the car moves. I mean, if you want to put such a thing in your backyard and don't like turn it on, maybe it could work. That's actually cool.
Yeah, some people might be fooled, but I agree it wouldn't fool everyone. Yeah, so there are degrees of fooling. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I also, you know, like it's always very like I'm not a fan of like dictating people what to do or what status to seek, but I see, you know, like that there certainly are destructive, like in my opinion, destructive, and maybe also, for example, consider, you know, like having as many slaves as possible. I think that's something which nowadays objectively you can say that's maybe a rather destructive status to seek. But yeah, I don't know. It might be hard. Maybe that's I was thinking of, you know, like you could like colonize different planets and then like, you know, like separate different people, or people are choosing to seek different statuses on different planets, and so everybody, you know, can be happy with the status they're seeking, basically.
Well,
although
even
that is already kind of something that is already like happening if you see the geographic separation in the world. So people right now can decide not to go to Saudi Arabia to choose those status symbols, and they can instead choose to go to Silicon Valley to choose the status they want to have and achieve. Yeah.
I just want to point out how Silicon Valley centric this whole conversation has been, since we've assumed that the best possible way to be is to be an entrepreneur. How self-centered
what
we
was
are.
Annoying. Yeah, yeah. That was what was like really disturbing me, and yeah, basically that's what I wanted to. Well, I never liked being too subjective, and I thought that was very subjective.
Of course, we hold our own values to be the highest of values, but I think there's a difference between having this as an opinion and then going so far as to say we should ban people from purchasing purses, or we should ban people from buying these license plates.
Yeah,
now, notice
totally.
that I'm not saying that. I'm only saying that we should use our own skills to like commoditize those things, as I say, to smash them through our own innovation, rather than to like force things on anyone, right? So like basically we leave them no choice, but not not at the point of a gun.
Yeah, that's right. I guess we can never not be subjective. So the only thing we can be is like make larger groups of our own intersubjectivity. So that's all we can do. I guess that's what Michael is trying to do, and I guess it's successful because I think we are on the same page that we like that sort of values, that we like to be entrepreneurs. We think that's the best way to influence. But then even like as an intersubjective perspective, I think it's important for us to focus on like how negative the entrepreneurs can also have impact on the world with strong impact. So it really is important where you spend like you can be an entrepreneur in marketing a fair company, and you come with new ideas and like selling fair products that just exploits animals. So that's also entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship and within the capitalistic economy, effective and impactful, but it's not necessarily in accordance with each person's values. So I guess then if you go one step back again, like I guess we all believe that like that's where we can have like longer discussions, like which channels do we want to entrepreneur for, so that we can come up with some backgrounds. And is it climate change? Is it like saving the planet? Is it equality? Is it justice? Is it, or it can be.
Yeah, all of this is, I think, to underpin your point earlier, Haas, which is that, like, what happens to people who have high status or who are appreciated? People listen to them. That's basically the outcome of that. So, you know, people listen to things that Elon Musk says about the environment or about Mars or about various things, or people listen to Bill Gates when he speculates about taxing robots. Like, if you've become influential for one reason or another, or if you have status for one reason or another, then you have the ability to influence other events going forward. And so the question in my mind is, what kind of people do we want guiding the world and influencing the world and making the world, into its future state? And if it's precisely those people that have status, then we better care about what kind of people have high status. And if it's the people that have the Rolex watches on their dogs, then I don't think those are the right people to be guiding us into the future. If it's the people who have been the most creative or created the most innovative product that's satisfied a great need, in my mind, those are going to be the likeliest people to come up with the best path forward for society. So it's a Darwinian thing that I think we should be harnessing the right kind of people to guide us.
But then, just one last point I want to make, which is really important to not fall for hypocrisy, because that's what happens in Iran right now. For example, the leaders of they really know that people know these things, and then they look the most modest lifestyles you can imagine. Like, they have a really, really poor lifestyle, but at the same time, they're manipulating and exploiting the whole economy and country, like with just their political decisions. So it's like a lot of people still fall for it. They think like, oh, look at the lifestyle they're just serving the country, and like they have a really poor lifestyle. They have a really cheap car, and like they don't look fancy, so they're good people. Like, but it's not. But these people have to update their values, just past those like initial.
Yeah, it's almost like the leaders that steal from their country, and that's the only, like, basically kleptocrats like, I don't know, Idi Amin or Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. They were just there to steal, basically, or Muammar Gaddafi, right? They were there to enrich themselves at the expense of the state, and you can sort of understand that. But when the guys are in there with like a totalitarian vision of how to organize their society, and they don't even care about enriching themselves, those are the guys to really be scared of, right? Hitler, Stalin, I guess maybe the leaders of Iran, as you say, like they're living as ascetics, or Osama bin Laden, right? I mean, he was a rich playboy. He could have lived a very consumption-driven life, but instead he chose to live in a cave and direct terror attacks. So I completely agree with you. It's very scary when someone chooses to radically follow an ideology.
So I think it's really, really cool what you said about how we can maybe try to like pick a status that will then like make or try to motivate people to achieve that status, or like you can also reframe it as, like choose a measure that gives you your status. And now it's the question, what are ways to like implement that? And I was thinking about, for example, how do you measure how wealthy a country is, which is a very subjective measure as well. But you introduce a measure which is then, I don't know, called GDP, and then people the politics in the country try to introduce policies to improve that specific number, that measure, and that will yield like what people in that country will do or like are motivated to do. I don't know how you think you would implement status to achieve. I don't know.
I guess social media is important. Marketing, political campaigns, all sorts of things like that.
But are you thinking about what metric we should be using to measure the goodness or progress of society? Like, as opposed to just GDP, we could use like a gross happiness index like Bhutan uses, or some other measure. Is that kind of what you're thinking of, like a metrics-driven approach to organizing?
So that's definitely something you would need to think about a measure. But like a measure for what is a high status and whatnot. But the question was more about how would you implement that? For example, you you have a community that you know, like you would like to have a certain status to seek? How would you implement that?
Well, what about Bill Gates? He has this giving pledge idea where the billionaires that sign up to this giving pledge commit to giving 90% or more of their wealth away in the course of their lifetimes. And the billionaires that sign up to this, they gain status and perhaps influence by saying, look, I may be a billionaire, and maybe you don't think that's a good thing because you worry that I will just fritter away my money on consumption goods. But look at this, I've just signed on to this positive thing for the world, and that's going. And then by creating this formal way of signing up to it, perhaps Bill Gates has created a new form of status that's better for the world.
So we could call, or define an activist to be a person which tries to implement or which tries to popularize a certain status among people.
So I wonder if, as entrepreneurs, we could come up with some kind of credo or pledge for entrepreneurs to innovate in a way that makes society a better place, rather than just to pursue creating the next social network for people that collect playing cards or something. That could be a way for us to smash the current status hierarchy and to create a new one.
We're basically talking about activism in general, because I don't know, look at different, for example, Bill Gates, your Bill Gates example. You could just say he's, and in his environment of billionaires, he's an activist to promote this certain, lifestyle or giving pledge. Activists are convinced of something to be, a good thing basically, or a thing that needs to be changed. And that's basically a status they are seeking, and they want others to seek as well. So I feel like we're just talking about activists right now.
I think we can talk always about this topic because it's really important. How we can employ activism into entrepreneurship and integrate them.
That's it for this week on Make the Future. Thanks for a great conversation, guys. I really enjoyed myself.
It was fun. It was a pleasure talking to you, like always, and I'm looking forward to next week.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice week.